And we have so many great things to export in this country. We don't need to be exporting abortion.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. Do you think that it's because that he owes a debt to some of the far left organizations that helped him get elected, that he feels that this is his payback, regardless that 65% of the American public don't support it?
And he may be one of the most extreme just naturally. He may not even feel that he needs to pay them back. But what's happening is in the primaries, we are getting more and more candidates coming out of the Democratic primary who are 100% pro-choice. They want to get that seal of approval, the 100% stamp of approval from Emily's List, from pro-choice, NARAL. And in order to get funding from those organizations, they have to be 100% pro-choice. That means all the extreme positions, even on partial birth abortion, where 99% of Americans are against it, they still take that extreme position so that they can get the approval from the ones who are going to fund them.
The ones that are going to fund them. The other, and I said we were going to deal with two things. The other thing, candidate Obama, when he was a candidate in July 2000, I believe it was July 2008, in a speech to abortion advocates who were worried about the increase in pro-life legislation at the state level. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the difference between federal and states' rights. The first thing I'll do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Freedom of Choice Act and what some of the consequences of that act are?
You'll also hear it called FOCA, which is the acronym, and you'll hear of groups like Fight FOCA and what have you. The Freedom of Choice Act is basically our worst nightmare. It would overturn every state's law regulating abortion. So parental consent, parental notification laws would be overturned. Ban on Medicaid funding for abortion. So they would force taxpayers in every state to be paying for abortions. Also informed consent, 24-hour waiting periods, the right to view your ultrasound, even just health care laws. And it would even force doctors and hospitals, like Catholic hospitals, to perform abortions.
Yeah, and I've heard that there are many Catholic hospitals who are making the commitment. If they're forced to perform abortions, they will close that hospital down before they'll do that.
That's war, isn't it?
That is war, and here in a nation where in California you've had 87, 89 hospitals close in Southern California just because of the cost of illegal immigrants coming in. If you had now dozens or maybe 100, 200 Catholic hospitals, what is going to happen to the rest of us? I mean, if those hospitals aren't there.
And if it's happening in our backyard, right? For some people, Southern California is pretty far away, pretty remote. But if the neighborhood is closing that's closest to you, all of a sudden now people are going to realize what they voted for.
It's a very scary thought. One of the things that you mentioned is parental notification. I think we probably should go into a little bit more detail on that so that our viewers really understand what eliminating parental notification would mean.
And Michigan is actually a parental consent state. Some states are parental notification, and some states don't have any requirement whatsoever. But the United States Supreme Court has said, even in Roe v. Wade, said that states have a legitimate governmental interest in preferring childbirth over abortion. And in subsequent cases, the Supreme Court said that states can pass parental notification, parental consent laws, that would be fine. And so this would even go against Supreme Court rulings. And so basically your daughter could go and have an abortion behind your back without even having a court involved in it. I mean, right now there is parental bypass where they can go to court and use their initials, but this wouldn't even have any court involvement.
That to me is scary. When anyone from my family is going into the hospital, I want to know about it. I want to be there. If a child or a grandchild is going in, then that my child should know about it, or I should know about it.
And the fact is, in Michigan, we have dropped abortions in half in Michigan, just about in half, because of all the good laws that we have, like parental consent and informed consent and the ban on Medicaid funding. And so you're going to see abortion doubled in Michigan again. And this will happen across the country if FOCA is passed. But it also violates state rights. So really, I think in the end, it'll be held unconstitutional. And you're going to get a lot of states' rights people really upset when they realize that this is the biggest usurpation of state rights ever.
I was recently in a meeting, and a well-known political figure was explaining why we need to allow illegal immigration. He says, we're in a world competition with China with 1 billion people, India with 1 billion people. We have 300 million, and if we're going to grow, you can either grow through birth or through immigration. So it was almost like he was accepting the 50 million children who have been aborted as being an alternative and allowing illegal immigrants coming into this country who are bringing all sorts of diseases, all sorts of other problems, and we're aborting our own citizens. It's unbelievable to me that we would lose 50 million people, and our leaders would see that as being an okay solution because we can bring illegal immigrants in.
It's kind of sad when you just see people as being a matter of a ledger sheet. That they're just replaceable and just like a widget. You're just going to replace them like a widget.
Pat Buchanan, who's an author that I enjoy reading, wrote a book a few years ago, The Death of the West, How Dying Populations and Immigrant Invasions Imperil Our Country. But they not only imperil our country, they imperil our civilization. There are other parts of the world whose population are exploding. The United States isn't. And one of the differences, for instance, the Muslim communities have strict laws against abortion. The Christians, up to 73% of the people who are getting abortions say they have some religious affiliation. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. And also Muslims, believe that children are a blessing.
Yes.
So they are having a lot of children, and they typically marry younger than we're marrying here in the United States. There's this old pro-life joke that there's 2 rabbits who are being chased by wolves, and one says, oh, come jump in this hole. And once they're in there, all of the other exit holes are surrounded by the wolves. And so the other rabbit says, well, now what are we going to do? And the first rabbit says, don't worry, we'll just stay here till we outnumber them. And, eventually it is just a matter of, as Pat Buchanan said, who's having babies. And eventually pro-life people will outnumber the pro-choice people, but it's not going to be really the way you think. I mean, all of our laws could be overturned if we have a supermajority who doesn't like our...
There's, in some of those countries, women are forced to wear burqas. They're not allowed to get an education. I don't think the pro-choice people are thinking this through in their logical way of looking at it. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
They're in ivory towers so high that they really have no clue what's actually...
And I think that's a good point, because quite often the people on both sides of the aisle enact laws that don't affect them and affect the great masses of people underneath them, and that's a real problem. Mm-hmm. Since we talked a little bit about law, you're an attorney. Tell us a little bit about your practice.
Well, I did close my practice to be a full-time stay-at-home mom and pro-life speaker, although I'm doing a little bit of guardian ad litem work now. But when I had my law practice, I was able to save babies. It was pretty amazing. I never thought that by becoming a family law attorney, I'd be able to do that. But I had women who were being coerced into aborting by their boyfriends, parents, or husbands, being told they could force an abortion, force an adoption, block an adoption, they'll kick her out, they'll get custody. And I gladly represented those women for free if it meant sparing the life of that child. And I have photos of babies and the tear-jerking thank you letters from their mothers. And I began doing work for crisis pregnancy centers so they understand an abortion-minded client's life-giving legal options, including guardianship, which is one that people don't think about a whole lot. It's a good option.